the issue with retention isn't just an HR task. It isn't Jackie's task from a talent. We needed this to be a new, excuse me, a leadership behavior demonstrated by leaders, because new hires aren't evaluating. Yes, they're evaluating some about our policies and procedures, but largely they're evaluating leaders. And what do you do? And are our leaders showing up when it matters, right?
So you're very welcome to another episode of Hiring Excellence. I'm Johnny Campbell, your host of the podcast and CEO and co-founder of Social Talent. And today on the show, we're going to be talking about how we deliver on the hiring promise we so often make. But a lot of companies just don't deliver on that promise. And often in TA, our job is to make the promise, attract people with the best story possible. But then when we ship them over the other side, that promise isn't delivered upon. We have high attrition, we lose folks, and we get those recs back on us. So our guest today is going to be talking about what she has learned in her career in talent management to address those issues, to make sure that what we sell upfront in hiring is delivered upon when folks come into our business. And it's my pleasure to welcome Jackie Lowery to the show. Jackie is the former Vice President of Talent Management at an organization called Southwire Company. You may or may not know Southwire. If you don't, Jackie, tell us all about it. But Jackie, I'll leave it to you maybe to tell us a little bit about yourself, your career, how you got into talent management, and maybe starting from where you're joining us from today.
Hello, Johnny. So glad to be a part of the podcast today. So joining you from Atlanta, Georgia, where the sun is shining, but it's about 40 degrees outside. So, go figure there. It looks deceiving with the temperature, what it feels like outside. So excited to be here to talk about, love this topic of, delivering on the hiring promise, because that's the scope when you think about what role I've played in organizations and leading talent management, right? So and tell you a little bit, Southwire, where I was the VP of talent management there. I had the responsibility of leading talent acquisition, talent development, performance management, succession planning, and employee experience. And Southwire, you may know, may not know, but is one of the largest North American providers of wire and cable resources. So when you think about everything that's happening in our country from an electrification perspective, Southwire is sitting at the epicenter of that. And it's a company's been around for 75 years, private family owned business that has an amazing origin story when you think about the founder of the company building the company because he wanted to ensure his grandmother could read by candlelight before she died. And so that was the premise and the heart that the company started from. So great company, great story, great product, and doing amazing things in the electrical industry today.
Wow, I love that. I love that origin story, and I'm going to talk a bit more about how you made more of that origin story. But maybe give me some numbers in terms of about how many employees. Is it largely manufacturing operation? What
Yes,
markets are you operating in?
definitely. Yes, it's definitely wire and cable manufacturing, about 9,000 employees across the US, Canada, Mexico, and Honduras. And again, playing in from, you think residential, wire and cable, everything that's going into houses. You go to your local Home Depot or Lowe's, they've got 60% or more of the shelf share of their wire and cable products there. So in most, I can't remember the exact numbers, but the stats, they're in 1 in 3 homes in America have Southwire's wiring running through it today, as well as they're playing in the electrification, the space when it comes to EV charging stations, working on microgrids in the data centers. So they're sitting in all of those actions taking place in those areas.
And so, Jackie, you joined the business just under 3 years ago. So tell me about this delivering on the hiring promise. So you were a new hire at the time when you joined, right? In your role, what did you find when you joined? How different was that to maybe the promise that you were made or others may have been made across, let's say, the manufacturing employees and the whole business?
Well, for me coming in on day one, they definitely had an onboarding process in place. However, would I say after that it delivered and gave that oomph? Now, I was naturally excited. I was engaged, my leadership team that I was working with. But when I stepped back and looked at the experience and when we talked about it, one of the first things they said day one, we need to fix this. We recognize that today we've gotten away and aren't necessarily delivering on the promise we intended to in the way we intended to do it. So they were excited about me coming in and being able to tackle helping the company reimagine it and what could it look like and how do we
So
do it better.
so how is it manifesting itself in terms of like how would you measure that it was working or not working, that onboarding process, and how was it measured at the time?
Yeah, great question. It was showing up in turnover. So
Mm,
definitely that was some of the challenges, especially when you look at the data and statistics that most new hires are making decisions if whether this is the right company in the first 30 days, and some are making it in that very first week. So
mm.
we were definitely experiencing some of those opportunities where those new hires weren't feeling that we had delivered on that promise, right? And it was showing up in the turnover and attrition. And then other would say it was showing up when you think about new hire engagement. You're looking at the efficacy of the process. People weren't having computers and everything, having their logins work, and those were just some structural issues that just needed to be fine tuned and streamlined. And so those were some of the things we were tasked with coming in to start to tackle and look at.
So what was the before? Before we go into the after, what you
Yeah.
did, you went through this process as well. So what was a typical onboarding process? And was it the same for every employee, or was it different for volume, different for corporate? What's
Yes.
that consist of?
Yeah, so definitely it was different between your corporate, salaried employees and your, hourly team members in the
Mm,
manufacturing. And there was generally, and you could think about that, right? When you bring in an hourly team member in the manufacturing facility, there's definitely some key things they need to know to keep them safe, how to operate, and key information. And a lot of, getting their new hire paperwork. On the salary side, you got a lot of the new hire paperwork, key things to get you integrated into the company. And then they had moved to and this was post COVID, right? So with everyone, your processes shifted and changed during COVID to a virtual onboarding, which it consisted of, individuals would start logging in to a Zoom call like this, and you'd have people presenting lots of PowerPoints and lots of information and presenters to overview about the company, about the safety, about a number of different things, right? And that was the essence of the experience. And then those new hires were released to their hiring managers.
So
And so
death
that
by
was
PowerPoint with no measurement of, they take it all in, just consume slides, goodbye, and then see you
consume
tomorrow. Yeah.
information, yeah,
Mm.
and again, and at the time, it was viewed as this is what we needed to try to do something, right? And COVID, they did have a in-person onboarding experience, and COVID shifted everything like many companies, right? Um, and so doing what the best you bringing together information, but it wasn't truly to your point. Was it designed? Did we design it in a way to deliver from through the big picture of delivering on that hiring promise? And that was where the opportunity you bring in, get new leaders, new way of thinking about, and actually the company, we were at a place to take a breath from the COVID and say, let's go back and think about what was making us great before COVID and how do we get back to that?
So where did you start, right? Because what you described there is not an untypical induction process where basic information is communicated or almost vomited at people. Here's all you need to know. Death by PowerPoint. Right, we're done. We have delivered and communicated the message, as in enough slides were set. Um,
Correct.
how do you begin to tackle that? And what were the first things you went after to try and improve it?
Well, some of the first things we did was we needed a bit more data and feedback, right? I mean, we definitely got your attrition, the end result data points, right? We've
Mm,
got that. But then we needed more intangible data. So we started building focus
mm,
groups of employees that had just started with the company within the last 30 days, 60 days, and 90 days, and asking them about their experience, right? What was day one like? What was their communication with their manager? What was the process like, leading up to them starting? So with their pre-boarding experience to day one, to then what happened, how did you have equipment, were there challenges, what issues did you run into, just to uncover the good, bad, and the ugly. And what we learned is we had some hit or misses, right? Some sites and locations, we didn't have the streamlined infrastructure in place. So you got some people had an experience, well, great, yes, I had my laptop, I had my cell phone, my system worked, all of these things. My manager met me, all of those things worked great. And then we had a lot where it wasn't. So what we learned is that we had some inconsistencies in what was happening after that after that onboarding PowerPoint presentation session, which lasted about a half a day. And so that's what we learned gathering that data. We started meeting with IT to learn and uncover what is the process for new hires to receive their equipment. How do we set up their connections, what access, what apps, what function systems they need to have access to? How is all of that done? So we then started partnering and spending time with our IT team to uncover what was working, how have we been doing things there, talking about the misses and the feedback that came out of those focus group discussions to really be able to frame the problem, right? And what we boiled it down to was we weren't helping people stick, right? And they weren't sticking because of how we onboarded, the onboarding experience in of itself, leadership involvement, manager accountability, and we didn't have early engagement signals in place, right? We from a survey or feedback or touch points, we didn't know that the disengagement or the disconnection, that no connection actually was made early on. Does that
So
make
if I can,
sense?
it does. If I can summarize them, I think I'm hearing you say there are a bunch of hygiene issues that were just like silly stuff that maybe
Mhm.
hadn't been thought out. No one had taken the time to kind of walk through. Are you set up correctly? Can you access your systems? Do I get a laptop? Do I know, am I being met in my first date? So there's a bunch of just kind of hygiene issues that are probably once you get your head around them,
Mhm.
say easy to solve. They're not complicated, but they do take time and effort and will.
Yes.
And the second is more, sounds to me like it's more around just how I feel. And do I feel like I belong? Do I have a friend early? Do I build a community? Does my manager talk to me? Do I know who's who? Would that be fair? That there's kind of
Oh,
I'm integrating into the network, which is
yeah.
I gather much more challenging.
No, you surmised that perfectly. Yes, the stickiness, that
Mm,
connection, right, was missing. And when we talked to many of definitely some of the leaders and people who'd been with the company, and Southwire has a rich history. I mean, you've got tenures of individuals who've been there 30 plus years, 40 plus years, 50. So the company has a rich heritage of people staying. So what was happening, and definitely when you think post COVID, we lost the ability to immerse them in the company culture, which, we learned is the company's secret sauce, right? That was what was working well, and we lost that connection and their stickiness to it, as you outlined it there. Great, great call out.
so I'm guessing you got rid of the Zoom calls and you got rid of the PowerPoint. Yeah.
Yes,
So did
we
you move it
did,
on
we did.
site then? Or was it on site induction or meeting? And if so, how is it different?
Yes, so we got rid of definitely the PowerPoints and moved into a definitely an immersive experience that was in person, and it
Mm,
then moved from before the process also, new hires could start anytime, right? So you had these virtual Zoom calls happening all the time with 1 person, 2 people, 5 people, you never know, right? Because hire days. So we centralized and created structure around, here are onboarding dates that
mm,
would be consistent, 2 days per month, right? Every 2 weeks, we would host this, and they would be in person, which meant every new hire was going to start on the same day, the same time, regardless of where they were located. Everyone, even if for those who were remote, it was great because now I'm not kind of starting out somewhere else. I actually now I'm starting coming to the corporate office in the corporate center of the company and connecting in person with others who are joining the company like myself. So yes, we moved to a 2-day mandatory in person, could not get around it. There were no exceptions. There was no like, we're not going to bring people in ahead of time and oh, they can come and catch up at late. No, everyone is starting because we were very intentional. We had to protect that experience. We're trying to create an experience for them to connect and with the company. And so then we moved to that, and day 1 was largely focused on helping those new hires answer the question, "Did I make the right decision by joining
mm.
Southwire?" That was the whole focus of day 1. Did I make the right decision? And I've seen when you look at a lot of the data, Gartner had put out some great research talking about those onboarding moments that matter, and particularly referencing that even when a candidate accepts a job offer, they're still wondering, "Did I make the right decision? And am I gonna get some buyer's remorse or feel some buyer's remorse?" And then they show up on day 1, and did they, to your point, did the company deliver on that hiring promise? Those recruiters, they told me about this great culture and this great company. Did all of that come through when I showed up on day one? And all of that meant everyone was in person. They stayed at a hotel. So we created a cohort experience. So they're all here staying at a hotel. They're having lunch and dinners together. We were conducting networking events where we brought their hiring managers to attend, as well as other senior leaders across the company. So many of them, right, new hires often maybe didn't meet their manager in person, conducted all of the interview process virtually like this. So here they are meeting with their leaders in person or other members of their organization and team. All of that was factored into on day one. And day two, we would get into day one is about how do you feel about working and being excited about joining the company. Day two is how do we help you be successful and
Mm.
effective in your new role here at Southwire. And so a lot of the framework and the process of what was outlined to them happened on day two. That's where equipment was issued to them right there with IT, walking them through, making sure everything works, answering questions, getting their company cell phones for salad, getting those things set up, actually even engaging in a volunteer initiative and activity, which is at a core piece of the company's culture, is giving back to the community. So all of that's woven into the overall 2-day experience. And then we get their, survey, get their feedback on that experience. And then they're turned over after those first 2 days. They spend time with their managers. Any additional onboarding is specifically for those who are local to the Atlanta market, those who are then travel back to their home offices if they're remote or their home work locations, and then continue with the next phases of their onboarding. And so the whole process became not just while I'm talking about those first 2 days, it actually is the first year. What we designed was a year-long onboarding process, engagement and touch points throughout, but having a high touch experience in those first few days.
So I love that idea of that cohort. I was on a flight to India last week, and we got delayed by a day, and
Mhm.
a bunch of us met in the line for the airline tickets, getting hotel rooms, and we bonded and the shared experience. We had lunch together, we had dinner together, we had a drink together, we met again in the airport, we took photos. It was this 24-hour experience. You really bond yourself to this group going through something at the same time. And it reminded me because I knew this conversation was coming up. I was going, I get it. I get that benefit of that in-person cohort interaction, smaller group going through a shared experience. But but I love your point of if it just ends there, it could fade away. So
Yes.
talk me through those next touch points because I could easily see getting the kind of buy-in to do a 2-day session in person instead, bit more budget for sure, but it could be worth it.
Mm.
Walk me through the other touch points over the year. Did the cohort come back together again? Was it something else done with the business? Tell me about the rest of the year, the rest of the time in your
Yes.
onboarding, because it's unusual to have an onboarding experience that lasts such a long time.
Absolutely, and really, honestly, it was interesting just even getting them because it was an increased expense, right? You go from people starting individually wherever to travel, hotel, meals to orchestrating and creating those instant connections in that network. But the other pieces that happened that really, I believed, kicked this experience up significantly was the leadership interaction and touch points. So, one of the elements of the components that each cohort class would be assigned an executive sponsor. And that executive sponsor would be a member of the executive team, and senior vice president or above, which meant it could some groups had the CFO or the COO or the CHRO, like your top C-suite leaders or your executive vice presidents, your senior vice presidents. So your top 25, 30 leaders in the organization had skin in the game to ensuring we created stickiness and building that connection with those in the new hire cohort groups as they came on. And they had 6 months of engagement with them.
Mm.
They were open, the leaders, we left it open. They could do longer than 6 months, but they had to do at least 6 months. So scheduling those touch points with their cohorts and just checking in, "Hey, how are things going?" Knowing that and being able to answer the question. A lot of times the
Mm.
new hire, you're coming in, "Does anybody know me here? Does anybody know me outside of my intact team?" Right? And so now they were able to build those connections answering that question. Does anybody see me? Does anybody know me? Who do I know in this company? And they could talk through challenges they were having. So they felt like early on, I've got an avenue to communicate up. and we could eliminated perceptions of, oh, I can't talk to senior most leaders. No, we made them accessible to you for that purpose. They want to help, they want to take in feedback and where they can help remove friction potentially, right? That was the purpose of getting those senior leaders engaged. And what it actually taught a different message also to our senior leaders, that the issue with retention isn't just an HR task. It isn't Jackie's task and from a talent. We needed this to be a new, excuse me, a leadership behavior demonstrated by leaders, because new hires aren't evaluating. Yes, they're evaluating some about our policies and procedures, but largely they're evaluating leaders. And what do you do? And are our leaders showing up when it matters, right? And do they walk the talk, right? And that's what those experiences were intended to create. So they're having those 6 months or longer of touch points there. Their cohorts were coming back together to, not necessarily in person, but there were group calls. So I had a team that was responsible for facilitating this onboarding and bringing the teams back to communicate, to talk, chat groups to talk through challenges, so they feel like they've got an avenue to connect, and they didn't feel like, hey, we dropped them off at your new job and said good luck, right? So there's still those touch points. And then we executed additional surveys at 90 days, 180 days, and 365 days to kind of see, are we seeing some signals and warning? And we started to compare that to what was the excitement, right? From after those first week ratings, we were getting, highest scale was a 5, so we're probably like 4.9, 4.85, ratings, engagement, and so forth there. Did we start to see that start to wane, and where? And how do we start to go in and create some interventions? How do we then connect and share that data with our HR business partners, those locally at the sites and the organizations, say, hey, we're seeing some signals here. Let's reach in and touch our leaders. How do they can help better hold those managers, those hiring local managers accountable. They're creating the right cadence, making sure people clearly understand the expectations and provide role clarity if something was falling through the cracks early on. So those were the key pieces that kept the group engaged in those touch points throughout the year.
I want to borrow that word accountable that you just used, Jackie, because I'm listening to this going, how the heck did you get the leaders to commit the time, turn up, every 2 weeks, depending on their
Yeah.
schedule, meet teams, to meet the cohorts, take that time out of their day, and then continue to do that across 6 months? I'm imagining without some sort of accountability mechanism, that would kind of quickly fall apart. A VP would say, I'm really busy, Jackie. I'd like to do that, but I got to skip these meetings. I can't make Tuesday. How did you do it? How did you keep that engagement?
Well, part of it again is tied to the culture. So the company, the leaders, I mean, they really did care and were genuinely bought in, because again, it
Mm,
wasn't it was a business risk. If we the
mm.
business could not continue to be successful if we were losing people at that higher rate. So they knew there was, from a business perspective, we've got to undercover and get in and help in this process. But they were also just generally interested in connecting. Really great group of leaders that aligned and really embodied the culture of the company and the spirit of the company. Some of them had a little bit of competition to say, hey, I'm not going to lose anyone from my team. And so they really took ownership of not wanting to anyone from their cohort to leave, and to really and kind of own that. And but just the buy-in, and also just recognizing that in order for this, and what I shared again, and we can put a system and a program in place, but the success is gonna hinge on, we've gotta have everyone's gotta be engaged and buy into and commit to that. And I provided an option. If we don't think we can do that long term, then let's do this, and we'll go to a model that doesn't include that, that could be virtual, but it's not gonna be best in class. And they resoundingly said, "No, we're gonna do it, and we're gonna do it right, and we're gonna
Wow.
commit to doing it." And the great thing about it that helped, I believe, with executive leaders, is about timing schedules, right? So because we planned and we had now set dates, you don't have the random, hey, somebody starting kind of just any date. We had core dates, and we went ahead and built out the schedules to know which leaders are assigned which cohort groups and which date and time periods, so their executives could help them manage their calendars and schedule to get it all built in. And if someone had a conflict, they could reach out to us early on and switch with another leader, but never not going to do one. But if they needed, let's say some business issue arose, someone had to go out of the country to take care of something, then they could say, hey, this leader is going to step in for this leader, and we could facilitate that, and we would work through it. So, but they were bought in, managed the schedule, committed the time to the process. So just really thankful that we had that engagement, but we had to structure and give the good process for how it worked, the feedback mechanism for them to give feedback to us, what was
Mhm.
working, giving and reporting back challenges. All of that was key and integral for it to work.
So in all this effort, commitment from the leadership team, extra budget for the off sites every 2 weeks, etc. Tell me about the results. What, did it pay dividends? How did you measure it? The outcomes? What did that begin to look like?
Oh yes, we definitely saw. We saw the initially the feedback. People were literally writing back and talking to us, "I'm so glad I joined this company. I made the right decision." And so you get the anecdotal, the emotional, those validations were coming through. It was showing up in the engagement data because we would go in and be able to segregate and created a new hire population group in our engagement survey data to look at the levels of engagement compared to before. And we saw huge improvements there. The turnover numbers went down dramatically. So we were measuring failed hires, right? And ideally looking at those who left within that first year, but we also wanted to drill into that 30, 60, 90 days. Where are we seeing any drop off in those? And those numbers decreased dramatically, um, to maybe, yeah, just reduced dramatically. I can't remember the exact percentage, but we saw massive the benefit, and the leaders saw that it was paying off, and it was improving the culture, the experience, and it was helping even better explain with the recruiters how they could then talk about, "Hey, come in and get this amazing onboarding experience," was now part of the hiring promise that could be delivered up front to get people excited about what they were gonna come in, and they could compare that to what they had experienced or what they thought they might experience if they were weighing out a different employer option, right?
And were you able, Jackie, to kind of measure that this was very different to what other competing employers were doing in the area? Or is this unique, or does everyone do this?
No, the feedback definitely the data and research that it was definitely not the standard, right? Many
Right.
companies, one, weren't doing anything in person,
Mm.
and those who were they didn't have the executive connections, they didn't have those instant cohort group and network, and that was some of the key feedback that the teams like, "I came in with an instant network." Like, I knew it could because their cohort group would include I might be an engineer, but also in my cohort group was someone from finance or someone from HR, someone from engineering or safety or operations. And now I know people in purchasing. I know somebody throughout all these different areas. If I'm having issue, I can reach out to someone. That was some of the feedback that the focus group came is they struggled trying to find and who to reach out to and figure out things. And so they didn't have that instant network. So that was another success point feedback that new hires was sharing with us in that instant network. And I believe that also really contributed to the stickiness, right? Because
Mm.
it's easy if I join an organization and I'm not really connected to anyone. Maybe I see my manager or a few people at my site, but I don't have really a tie to the company yet. So it makes it a lot easier to hit that self eject button because nobody knows me. Nobody's really going to miss me. I'm not really connected. I didn't get in and connect. So it's easy to walk away from that. And that's, I think, was the compelling story that was now being presented that our those, new hires now were faced with, "Wow, I know the COO of the company. I have a regular touch point with and I know his name is this person, and I know this and so now I can sit and talk to those individuals, and it's not a negative, and they got excited to go back and tell their families these stories. "This is about the company I joined. Did you know they do this?" And, like, they went all of those things where they were just literally excited about being a part of the legacy and the story and the work at Southwire.
It reminds me of I think it's the Great Places to Work survey. There's a magic question, which is, I think, something along the lines of, do you have a friend at work? And
Yeah,
apparently it's one of the biggest correlatory factors to your engagement. If you have friends at work, you're more likely to be, as you say, part of a network. You
yep.
have that glue that's kind of bringing you closer to the business. And I love the
Absolutely.
way that, That's really, I
I'm
love the
so sorry.
deliberate
I
way
just
you've gone to do it. It's just, it's
yeah.
fantastic. But shoot, because I'm going to ask you
Sorry.
to kind of summarize your kind of learnings for other leaders,
Yeah.
but you want to jump in with a one other, which I love because you've
It was one
so
other.
much.
It just came to it because I also forgot about when we talked about the other aspect of the process. Yes, we created the right storytelling and the connection. We created that, but the other piece was the readiness for the job. And that was the piece I
Mhm.
forgot was another key measure we looked at, right? So we partnered that work with IT to streamline. So before it was really anybody, picking laptops was and then when how things got ordered, then we streamlined to say, by function, these are the approved equipment, and these are gonna be in stock, and guess what? This is when these get ordered, they're gonna be in place, people's access, all of those things, their email's gonna work, they're gonna have access to the system, we're not all of those issues went away. Like, it was amazing that the readiness it created for people to feel excited and comfortable to move in and start doing their jobs was another of our data point and measures that was a key success point, outside of the as a output of the program as well.
When you started, Jackie, by sharing with us that one of your first learnings was, to survey, to find out from folks who'd already joined,
Mhm.
what the good, the bad, and the ugly looked like. It's such an obvious thing, but it's often not done. Um, what else would you say are your top learnings that you'd pass on to other leaders who are trying to make that connect between the
Mhm.
sell at the hiring moment to the reality when you join and you have to
Yeah.
actually go to work?
Yeah. And honestly, in this day, it really comes down to the human side of this, right? Do we have we created a compelling story that makes us attractive? And
Hmm.
that's beyond the things to your point, right? That yes, okay, you've got these benefits or that like what is it that an employee I can connect and say that connects with me and how do we articulating that? So really getting people a story that they can see themselves in, right? Was a key component when we talked about the designing of the onboarding experience, right? So getting that story about the company, the heart of who we are that would resonate because now and keep in mind now there may be some people that it may not resonate with, but that's okay too, right? But and for those it will, we need to make sure we have that story front and center and making sure we're explaining it and then create that connection. I think we a lot of times maybe today in the hybrid and remote work environment forget the power of connection. Even like your experience in the airport, right? That those spontaneous, those moments of connecting with people from different, at different stages, different tenures, right? Again, you could have an engineer sitting here talking with an executive vice president because this process was required for all levels. It didn't matter if you were coming in as an executive vice president of the company responsible for 5,000 employees, you came through the same experience that the engineer or the specialist or the accountant came through, right? So now you're building relationships and now we're all in this shared experience, regardless of our titles, our levels
Right.
of what we do, right? And now I've got relationships across all levels across the organization. So creating that connection, being intentional about creating that connection, I think is very crucial. Even to your point, the data point, do I have a friend at work? Um, and do I have a network? Many companies actually created an affinity group or employee resource group just for new hires. We had looked at that, but we felt that the connections we were creating with the cohort experience was going to deliver that. And so but maybe later that could be something, but definitely how are we intentional about creating that network and then focusing on the readiness. We had to get clear about and those were the three things we were focused on solving, right? And so getting the story right, creating that connection and ensuring that readiness, right? Ensuring people can actually do their jobs because friction was also causing a
Mm.
lot of lack of engagement and connection was that friction and that frustration with how am I joining? You knew I was starting today and how do I not have a computer? How is nothing working? Right.
And I imagine on the very basic level, there's cost
Yep,
savings and there's the people you didn't have to rehire because your
that's
attrition went
exactly
down, which
right.
is a no-brainer, right? Less training you had to give to new people because you're starting less
Emotional
people because
buy-in, operational confidence, right? So guess what? Now they're excited. They're going to be high performers. They're going to go above and beyond. Those were the outputs and measurements that you get as a benefit of doing onboarding right.
well, they're the ones that really excite me, right? There's the, again, basics, which of course finance can measure the basics in terms of less attrition, but having a more engaged workforce, having a
Yeah.
workforce, to your point, that is networked well across the business, who do have people at different levels that they knew from day one. That's someone
Yeah.
they can go to. They can, it helps in communication, it helps in alignment,
Mhm.
it helps in readiness. Harder things to measure over time, right? But
Yep,
you just have to believe they are the net benefits of it. Jackie, it's a
absolutely.
it's an amazing story, right? And I think one that is so often underlooked and we don't put the effort into in terms of making the connections. And as you said, it's not complicated. It can take a lot of will to do it, right? It takes
Oh,
buy-in from across the business. Probably takes a culture that believes it's the right way of doing it. But thank you for showing the way. That's a great story, Jackie.
thank you. Thank you. It was an amazing experience, amazing opportunity. Probably one of the many things that I'm most proud of in the work that I did at Southwire and the
Well,
work the teams we accomplished together there.
Jackie, I'm hoping to hear you do similar work in your next move. And I know that you're taking some time to try and identify the next right opportunity for you. And if I was listening to this thinking we need a Jackie Lowery in our business, what's the best way to reach out to you?
Definitely Jackie Lowery or Jacqueline Lowery. I'm on LinkedIn. Definitely feel free to reach out and engage with me. Would love to continue, doing this kind of work across any organization and just bringing that element that those strong talent systems that drive business impact. And that's what we got the opportunity to do with the onboarding there. And I'd love to be able to do that for any new company out there today.
I'd be proud to have you. Jackie, thank you so much for joining us today from cold Georgia to share that story. We're heading into spring, so hopefully it warms up soon. And
Thank you,
I'd love to hear
Johnny.
about your next move, your next initiative. So maybe we'll have you back once you've got that up and running and proven success
I
again.
would love that.
Jackie, not at all. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Johnny.
And thank you, the listener, for joining us this week and listening to that story again, how we bridge the talent promise we make and then the talent promise we can deliver when someone starts the job. I think Jackie has very much shown the way in terms of simple steps we can take in any organization to make sure that we improve that readiness and engagement in our workforce, not just hire the best people, but retain them and get them to do their best work. We'll be back again next week with another great guest. Don't forget to follow us on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts, or do check us out live if you'd like to see the live broadcast on LinkedIn, on my profile, Johnny Campbell, or on Social Talent, or you can check us out on YouTube at Social Talent as well. Until next week, take care.